Welcome into a Clippers Talk Live. It's live, so yeah, of course it's new, Adam. The redundancy mistakes are killing me lately. I'm Adam Osland. It's a new show here on Clippers Talk. It is also a live show. Appreciate all you guys. I should probably tweet out that we're going live right now. I messed that part up too. Mistakes are being made like over and over again. We are live. We're going to do it live on Clippers Talk. I'll write it and we'll do it live. I did write down some thoughts a little bit earlier while I was at the gym. And before I bring in Dr. Shap, I want to get to him. I want to rant a little bit because we just had a really big show yesterday with La Murray of The Athletic that I was pretty happy with because I got to ask the tough questions. Some real tough questions. Some things that have not been asked on any other show with Dr. Shap. I guarantee you that. As I shoot out the Michael Buffer, we are live GIF on my X account. Evil Bot's in, yes, sir. Mio is in. Let's effing go. Evil Bot says I'm too quick. I guess so. He's been first. That Mexican R is here. Clip gang or don't bang. X Mongo Project said, this is too early for me. Maybe I'll do a Clippers talk after dark later, too. Most of the NFL games aren't that great in the second slate, even though we got Niners, KC, but Kansas City's up 14-3. So I want to go over a few things because I'm still feeling a little bit spicy. I'm still feeling, after the conversation with La Murray, that I need to clarify a couple of things with you guys. And if you haven't watched that episode, I think it's already got 1,400 views or something like that. I highly recommend it because I wanted to get and set the record straight on a few things with Kawhi Leonard. Joe Rosenfeld says, can't get enough Clippers content. Thank you, Adam. Matt Warren's in here. It's a Sunday, so he must not be as busy with his daddy duties. Maybe he's getting ready for a talking ship episode with Brandon Marcus. Kelly O is a real possibility. How? With PJ Tucker? Oh, you said just kidding. That goes back to a situation where a couple weeks ago I was accused, of saying that they could somehow get Kelly Olynyk for PJ Tucker, which I never said. I was just retweeting what somebody else said, and then I shot it down pretty damn quick here. Evilbot said, too early. Well, you're right. It's 6 p.m. Evilbot's on Eastern time. Okay, you guys are derailing me over and over again. I have a preamble here before we get to Dr. Shap. The La Murray episode is a must listen. I love and respect Law. We're friends or acquaintances or have professional mutual respect for one another. At least I certainly do for him. I think he does for me. He's always been accessible to the fans, to the podcasters like myself. And I wanted to push him on some things. And anyone over the years that has said, I'm a company man just because I get paid by the Clippers, which I've always been transparent about. Well, I highly recommend that La Murray episode. Because just because I get paid by them doesn't mean I can't get frustrated or that I stop pursuing the truth of some of these issues. That's false. That's a complete false narrative. Some people were saying, why are you always protecting Kawhi? Did I sound like I was protecting anybody yesterday? I've listened to other interviews with La Murray recently. I didn't hear anyone else pushing him about his tweet about Kawhi being fine after the report from China. I didn't hear anyone saying, are the same people or sources that are hopeful now about Kawhi and feeling optimistic the same ones who said it was fine then? I let Law talk. He pushed back on some things. It was a good conversation. But his reporting on how there hasn't been a setback since training camp, which is important, of course, but I still had to bring up that, well, there has been a setback, though, since the surgery. That came out on Thursday with Coach Lou. That's pretty significant. I've been on record since April saying the injury is concerning, and it doesn't matter that he plays. It matters how he responds to that so he can continue to play. I said then, of course, he's going to try to play against Dallas. He did, but it didn't respond well. Check the tape on Clippers Talk. Check on Clips and Dip. I've expressed a high level of concern and fear from day one regarding this new injury with Kawhi with the swelling in his right knee. And people are still saying, company man, I don't know what else I could do. But aside from that, the more I think about it, him having a setback at all since the surgery, which apparently occurred right after Team USA let him go, according to Coach Lou on Thursday, is probably more significant than him not having one since training camp started in September. Like, I'm glad we got that report. That's cool. But if he hasn't truly tested his knee with real basketball movements since training camp, well, I hope he hasn't had a setback. If he's just strengthening his knee, if he's going through some strength and conditioning stuff, I would hope he hasn't had a setback, because when the setbacks have occurred back in April, after they had 3 weeks to a month to try to get it under control to play against Dallas, and they couldn't get it to go, and then with Team USA or right afterwards, according to Coach Lou on Thursday, it's because he's doing basketball movements. That's when the setbacks have come. So I just don't know how meaningful it is that he hasn't had one since September, since training camp, when he's not doing basketball movements yet. Until he practices. And then there's no setback, and the swelling doesn't pop back up. It just doesn't mean that much to me. And then the next step after that would be, can he play contact stuff? Can he play in games and play in consecutive games without the swelling going back up? That's when it's going to be meaningful. If he can't make it over a sustained period of time without it returning, all these reports don't mean that much to me. I don't know about, hey, no setbacks since September. I like hearing that, but he's not doing basketball stuff yet, from what we've heard. So why would there be? Because whenever there's been a setback, it's from obviously playing out there at a high level in the NBA. Whether it be against Dallas or with Team USA. Because Coach Lou said something to the effect, and I want to pull up the quote and have it correctly for you, but when he brought up the setback on Thursday after the question by Joey Lynn from SI Now, who asked it the very first question of the press conference, Coach Lou said, quote, once you start playing, you never know what's going to happen. So it's really about, can he play basketball and not have a setback? Not, can he strengthen and condition the knee? I mean, that's still important, yes, but can he actually play basketball and then there's no setback? That's what we're looking for here, right? So great. I love the reporting. I love Lob Murray and The Athletic. This is not criticism on him at all. I'm just saying he was obviously right talking about how he's been indefinite for a while. Lob Murray had him going week to week, not day to day, because if he's not practicing, he's not playing in a game yet. So it should have been pretty obvious to anyone who was paying attention that he obviously wasn't playing next week. I tried to spell it out for everyone with my Kawhi deep dive like 10 days ago. looking at all the quotes we had, looking at Kawhi talking about there's always a build up, a ramp up before playing. I don't know how you could have thought he was going to jump from not practicing to playing in a game. Kawhi said, especially basically with the situation I'm in, there's going to be a longer ramp up because of what he's been through. He's got to practice first. Let me know when he's practicing. That would be news. And again, I just think it's more significant that now we know he has had a setback since the surgery than it is that he hasn't had a setback since September. Okay, great. He still had one since May, since the surgery. Now, if we knew that, we could have been like, oh, now we understand why they're being so overly cautious now, when it sounds like it may even be pissing off Kawhi not being able to play because he feels like he's ready to go, according to Coach Lou. It's because he already had one setback. So it's been a wild week, guys, and just sorting through what the truth is. I don't know how many times I've been critical, but I understand the frustration. But people calling me out all the time, it doesn't hold water. It doesn't line up with the facts. Nobody has been tougher in an interview with Law Murray, and I bet he would attest to that, than I was yesterday. I didn't hear anybody else this week press him on the fine tweet or how, it's cool that he hasn't had a setback, but he also hasn't since September. Let's qualify it. Let's put it since September. He hasn't had a setback, but he has had a setback. That's great. But he's also not doing the things that had led to a setback before yet. So let's pump the brakes a little bit, right? Let's wait for the real news. He's practicing again, and there's no recurring swelling. That's what I want to hear. That's what I'm waiting for. I want Kawhi to be able to play in 10 straight games. And the swelling isn't coming back up. That would be significant. Because at this point, that hasn't been proven. I'm as hopeful as anyone. I'm as sympathetic to Kawhi as anyone. I hate that this is happening. He's my favorite player. Kawhi wants to play. His knee won't cooperate. Kawhi wants to play. The team has to save him from himself right now. But everyone getting at me and guys like Jesse and others say, oh, didn't you hear what Law said? It's like, yeah, I had him on. I asked him about it. Not having a setback since September is different than not having a setback at all. Because he's not doing basketball stuff yet. So yeah, hope he hasn't had one. And that is the case currently. But he did have one, according to Coach Lou, on Thursday. For more on this, we bring in Dr. Shap from the Lob, the Jam, the podcast, 213 Hoops Empire. I came on with him yesterday as they're going around the horn with the media before the season starts. It's a really cool feature on the Lob, the Jam, the podcast. They do it every year where they check in with everybody who's plugged in. I don't know why they're talking to me, but all the big hitters are coming on the Lob, the Jam, the podcast right now for their annual, test the room temperature of where this team is at.
Yeah.
How we doing, Dr. Shap?
I'm good. You can hear me okay? I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty loud, so.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, Burbank to Glendale. Yeah.
I didn't know we were that close. Come over.
Pretty close. Yeah, how's it going? It's so funny that I had you and Law on the Around the Beat yesterday, and you guys talked to each other that same day. Like, great, you know?
Yeah, and it was cordial the entire time. I wouldn't even say combative, but it got real honest about the reporting with Kawhi, what's been happening, what's meaningful, what isn't, at least to me. And everybody else can, have their own opinion on these things. But my position right now is great. No setback since he hasn't been doing basketball stuff. That just doesn't mean as much to me.
Yeah, I mean he's not progressing. I think that's the bigger way that people can put this in is he's not progressing enough to be just playing preseason basketball even. I'm like out of words about the Kawhi stuff. It sucks. It sounds like he had a scope in May for a cleanup procedure and he tried to get back out there for Team USA afterwards and was doing okay during the whole time, came back out and then had a setback soon after or something resulting from setback, whatever that means. I don't know exactly what that means, but that's what Ty kind of said.
I want to play that clip since we're
Go
talking
ahead.
about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to make sure everybody has a reference point and know exactly what we're referring to here. I think it would be good because the way you just put it there is interesting because I do think there's another way to take what he meant by setback. I'm not sure it's the way I would go with it, but I do want to play this for everybody here, and we'll hear more from Dr. Shap on this, who is a real doctor with a medical background and can speak to this much better than I can.
We obviously saw the Kawhi news today that he's going to be out indefinitely. I just wanted to ask, when we were talking to Lawrence in Vegas, and he expressed a level of disappointment that Kawhi was not going to be given the opportunity to kind of ramp up and have an opportunity to compete in the Olympics. What transpired between then and now to where you guys felt a level of optimism that he was going to be able to potentially contribute in Paris to where now he's not ready for the start of the season?
Yeah, I mean, he felt good. He looked good. The swelling was down. Everything was going in the right direction. So he had worked hard to get to that point. And then, once you start playing, you never know what's going to happen, But he was in position, we thought, in the right position to go forward. And like I said, it was just a setback. So that was unfortunate.
So there was a setback between then and now?
No, well, because he didn't, I'm saying after the USA trials, yeah, it was. We continue to ramp up, continue to play, continue to work out.
All right, you said twice there. Expand on those hmms.
I mean, he's saying that Team USA, for the most part, company line, Lawrence Frank too, after the Team USA camp happened, was that, we expected him. Everything sounds like during Team USA was fine. That sounded like the company line for the most part, that Team USA itself was okay. It was kind of a surprise to the Clippers that there's this idea that the Clippers and Team USA in conjunction had this idea to send him home. And then Lawrence Frank was kind of like, we were just expecting him to play. From all they could hear, that things were going okay. Then he got sent home. From what Ty is saying here, it sounds like there was a setback. It kind of everything was going fine, and then he was sent home, and maybe something in between. It's so vague,
The alternate explanation is what he meant by setback is just the fact that he was sent home, not necessarily that something occurred physically that was a setback. Just the fact that he couldn't play for Team USA was a setback. I'm not saying that's what I'm going with, but because the other part of the context is, again, that quote, once you start playing, you never know what's going to happen, that he said there. That makes me think something happened.
All I know is that Kawhi Leonard has not played in the preseason. He's not going to play in the regular season opener. And that is not the progress you would want. What happened in between, if the setback was actually not playing in the Olympics, or if he, it's like this figurative setback that he wanted to play for Team USA and he didn't. To me, all that is almost in the background to me. He had a cleanup in May. He tried to give it a go, Team USA. Personally, I kind of feel like he was just trying to ramp himself up, and Team USA wasn't playing it that way. It was like, we need guys right away. We need guys who can play right away, full capability, all that stuff.
Which is kind of BS because KD wasn't playing at all then, but he had the scoring record on the line, the all-time scoring record with Team USA.
Who do you anticipate throwing in 25 minutes? Be yourself, Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard. I love Kawhi Leonard, but if Kevin Durant came back, and he was pretty good very quickly. I expect Kevin Durant to not need a ramp-up time from his injury versus Kawhi. So, and also he had history on the line. Kevin Durant is arguably the best Olympian ever to play, all that stuff.
Yeah.
He has cachet with the Olympics team that Kawhi doesn't. So, either way, I think there's just a lot of this idea of like, well, where was the setback? I know Law has been pretty vocal about there not being setbacks, quote unquote.
No. He said there's no setback since training camp. He
Yeah.
acknowledges what Coach
Yeah.
Lue said there was a setback. His timeline for his article that came out 20 minutes before Coach Lue said that is apparently from September since the Lawrence Frank presser and since training camp.
Right.
So there was one setback, even according to Law.
Honestly, in general, like I'm over it. Like his swelling isn't totally controlled, not to the point where he can just play basketball the way that we want him to. He's not playing the regular season opener. He's not progressing the way that the Clippers want, the way that he wants. It's frustrating. So to me, all this semantic stuff about well, when was the setback? Did he have anything that happened? To me, it's sort of moot because he's just not playing. He's not where we want him to be. There's this idea that he is going to be where we want him to be, hopefully in the future. I know, there's this idea that maybe with a few weeks, that's hopeful and all good and dandy. I think the Clippers still want him to play, the majority of the regular season games if possible. But
that's the feeling Law has. That everybody still feels like he's going to return. I pressed him on. He said something to the effect of relatively soon. I said, what does that mean? Before the end of this year? And I was dead serious. I mean, honest. How can you not say that at this point? Like, what does relatively soon mean?
Yeah.
And he kind of snickered and said, before the end of this year, Adam, he is going to play. But the question is, I have no doubt he might play in the next month, the next few weeks. Will he be able to come back and play right after that? Or will the swelling return and that will take him out is the question.
No, these comments are funny, man. I've never been on one of these lives. But yeah, I think that the truth of the matter is, Kawhi, you need to hit certain steps to be able to play regular season basketball, and Kawhi simply hasn't hit those steps yet. He has a troublesome knee. It's been giving him problems for a long time. He's had a procedure done this offseason to hopefully rectify some of that, see what's going on exactly. He's had recurrent inflammation in that knee since April that hasn't been to totally be controlled, and it's something that he's just going to have to play with, before we get into experimental stuff that I don't even want to think about with, that Lonzo Ball has gone through. I think Brian Sutter, who's a great follow on Twitter, is a sports doc, was talking about his wariness that Kawhi might enter this area of experimental treatment. If things don't work out this time around this season, it's going to be a big deal for Kawhi Leonard if he can come back and just play a chunk of regular season games and not have another setback. If Kawhi Leonard, the real success story for the Clippers this year would be if Kawhi Leonard played a full playoff series. That would be a huge success. Yeah. Or if he got traded, personally. If he got traded in the midseason, played good enough that the Clippers were able to get any sort of value for his deal, that would also be a huge, change in direction. But it would be something the Clippers absolutely should and possibly will consider. We'll see about that. But if it's the idea that Kawhi Leonard should be a Clipper and play out his deal, if he can get through a playoff series, then that's the massive success. If the Clippers can make the playoffs because of Kawhi Leonard, and he can also get through a playoff series healthy, and they lose even in the first round, or maybe they win again in the second round, that would be a massive success. That would be the success of the season, So
yeah. You mentioned, Doc, experimental treatment, and Tim A said this a little bit ago. The Clippers and Kawhi mentioned that they have a better feel for how to manage his injury at the Lawrence Frank presser, at media day the week after. Do you think that new approach is after the setback or before? Well, it's obviously after, because it happened in July or whatever, early July, when he was sent home from Team USA. But the surgery was also before that. So if he had the surgery and the setback included inflammation returning even after the surgery, that's concerning. And by the way, we're not here to be alarmists and try to make anyone say the sky is falling or anything like that. But I'm pretty damn sure with Clipper Nation right now, they already feel like that. Anything can go wrong, will go wrong, and it's I'll believe it when I see it type of stuff when it comes to Kawhi Leonard, which is totally understandable. Even Big Zeus said a couple of seasons ago, feels like the Clippers can't have nice things. That's the place most people are at. So I'd at least like to look at the facts of the situation and maybe try to find some solutions or ask Dr. Shap here, what could that mean with them having a different approach to how to handle the swelling? Any ideas?
You know, if they saw anything that was particularly concerning in the scope that they did, then they would have rectified it, because MRIs can sometimes be limited, especially if you have inflammation. You can't really see everything. Orthos are so good at seeing stuff. But if there's recurrent inflammation, sometimes the only way to see what's going on is a scope. I mean, a scope is, a fancy word for, I've mentioned this before, maybe on here, but a laparoscopic procedure is when you get a camera and you take a look inside the knee. It's the best way to see what's going on. You very much could see inflammation on an MRI and then go in with a scope and then see tears that need to be repaired, or meniscus that needs to be removed, or a ligament that has a sprain that's, sometimes we don't grade sprains on pictures, and we grade them even more specifically based on a scope, because that's where you can see stuff. But from all that we've heard, he just had kind of a cleanup thing. And
again, what does that mean? Because
Like he
everybody
said,
loves to say it and sound smart, but you
he
actually know
hasn't
what it is.
he hasn't had removal of any. He hasn't had any sort of repair or replacement of any major ligament. He hasn't had any of his meniscus properly removed, a meniscectomy. He hasn't had a repair of his meniscus. It would make it impossible for him to play. If he had a meniscus repair, he would not have played Team USA. A removal would have made it possible for him to play, a chunk of his meniscus being removed, but that very likely would have been a story.
So that stuff's not included in a cleanup. So what is?
Yeah, a cleanup is just like, I have debris and it needs to be kind of removed.
What's the debris? What is it made up of?
Debris is just like, if you have your knee and then you have your knee joint and your bones are on your meniscus is like a padding. And if you just have shards that kind of be around the area, then you have some of it kind of removed off or shaved off a little bit, just like little bits and pieces that you can have kind of taken off or just kind of cleaned up. Or if you have inflammatory effect from that, you can kind of just clean the area. It's just like often people feel great afterwards. Now, if they have recurrent chronic issues, now the inflammation can come back. And it's likely what Kawhi is dealing with, because I think he just has a chronically bad knee a bit there.
I quoted you from what we talked about on the Lob the Jam, the podcast yesterday with Law Murray, and I hope I did accurately.
Oh, did you?
But you mentioned how I'm not trying to spread any more misinformation on this channel than some people in the chat. You mentioned how bone on bone alone could lead to inflammation. Is that correct?
Yeah, it can. So I have patients who are old and have recurrent inflammation, and you can give them a steroid injection once every few months and help the inflammation kind of go down. Bone on bone, it's just like scraping these like things scraping against each other. And if you're moving and you have a joint and that's just constantly kind of moving against each other, you can imagine that's going to cause a little bit of inflammation and swelling. I don't know how bone on bone Kawhi Leonard is. Bone on bone is a term that you can diagnose just by X-rays usually.
We don't have his medical records. We're speaking in general here.
Yeah, I don't, unfortunately. I would, if I asked for them, they wouldn't let me ask another question pre-game or post-game. I know better with the Clippers. But
so you think the debris, though, alone could be something that could lead to the inflammation?
I think Kawhi Leonard has a bad knee. Yeah. And I think he's going to be dealing with inflammation recurrently to his knee the rest of his career.
And he acknowledged that, but he also said, we think we have a handle on it at media day.
So now it's just going to be a matter of pain management, how he can move his leg. If he ever locks up, they could always just be like, we got to take it easy,
What's a lockup mean?
Like, let's say he's just moving his knee during practice one day and he's just like, it feels off to me. They would not play him that day. If he just like moves his leg and he's just like, I'm not able to make my normal movements. I'm just kind of getting stuck on this pivot or whatever.
What's happening inside though for that to happen is what I mean, I guess. A lot.
it's interesting because you could take a picture of somebody's knee and they can have inflammation, but one player reacts to it differently than another player. That's why we don't get MRIs on every person that walks into my room, our clinics in their 30s or in their 40s, because a lot of people have a degree of a meniscus tear, but they have no idea, But if it's more clinical, it's more, and by clinical I mean it's more of just how he reacts on the court. If he's just reacting on the court and he's so robotic and mechanical the way he plays basketball, that if he's doing just a pivot, fadeaway, going to one side, and he feels like, oh, I can't do that the same way for some reason, then they would get concerned and they would think about this whole thing over again. So
Is it fair to say, though, swelling in the body is not normal or random? It's an indication something else is happening deeper.
yeah. If you have inflammation, then something is, you have inflammation is a warning sign that something is going on in your body.
And that could mean a myriad of things.
Like, it means so many things. Yeah.
All right. I don't know how we could expand any further on Kawhi and his knee.
To me, it's just like it. If I was a Clipper fan, and I am,
if he's out there, it's a bonus right now. Just think of it like that.
If he's out there, it's a bonus. Hope for the best. I think that there's still enough greatness that we saw from Kawhi last year that I don't think the idea of him returning to that is out of, expectation or out of what could happen. But to me right now, it's just Kawhi needs to get back to where he's comfortable. The team needs to get back to his medical team needs to get back to seeing him comfortable. He needs to be able to do everything that makes Kawhi Leonard comfortably. And then from there, you have to just kind of manage his body and limit every variable you can. And by variables, cut out back-to-backs, watch his minutes, be just very vocal, and he has to be very vocal with how he's feeling to the team and to the staff, is feeling good, all that stuff, Weird stuff for a basketball player. But stuff that you have to just eliminate variables. And you know what? You could do everything right. The Clippers were on the cusp of a championship when they were playing the Utah Jazz. And Joe Ingles comes up to Kawhi a little aggressively, and that's it. The Clippers are doing everything right. Last year, they were doing everything right. Didn't even see what happened. They were doing everything you possibly could right. Kawhi wanted to play more.
He looked great his last game before this happened, March 31st against Charlotte. I commented post-game, he was moving awesome. He blew past Miles Bridges.
Yeah, that Philadelphia game, maybe the game before on the road trip, he literally had to drag the team to beat an Embiid-less Sixers team, and he was great. He had 2 big layups and free throws that closed the game. Like, he looked like Kawhi, and I was thinking, man, Kawhi needs to do so much for this team to beat this bad Sixers team without their guys. And that was, one of the last games we kind of saw him out there. It's really tough because he just has delicate knees. Honestly, I know a lot of Clipper fans are really mad at Joe Ingles for what he did in the Utah game.
I've watched that play many times. I don't think it looks dirty to me. It honestly doesn't.
To me, it's just like he has fragile knees, and an ACL tear on top, of the the quad stuff he had before, and then the meniscus thing that happened a year later or a couple years later. All that stuff just really adds up for a guy who's just chronically kind of hurt, and it's just really hard for him. And it really sucks. Like, I think I talked to Law on the Around the Beat, and honestly, just what I come out of the Kawhi stuff is, could there be more transparency, complete transparent? Sure, but is it going to change much? Like, I don't know. I think it's going to make the fans feel more, at least we know what's going on. I think
wouldn't it also be highly technical if they actually got into stuff and everyone would be like, duh?
Honestly, I wish fans were more educated on gradings of sprains and how long a certain grade meant they're out, how much this puts you on the degree of, I might need surgery if things don't get better after certain. I wish that people didn't treat fans stupidly and kind of treat. I mean, whenever I talk about medicine on the podcast, I try not to talk about it too much because, I don't want to go over people's heads. But when I do, I treat people like they're smart, that if they listen to what I say, that they'll have an idea. And I wish that there was a degree of that transparency with because I do know some teams right away will be like, so and so has a grade 3 sprain, a grade 2 sprain, whatever. I would normalize that. I've wanted to normalize gradings and saying it out loud to fans, because fans will, if you say, oh, so and so has inflammation, fans will Google the hell out of that, and then they'll freak themselves out even more. I love that. I would love for there to be a degree of education with like sports injuries to fans, because fans go rampant when they hear edema. I can't tell you the amount of things that people said with Paul George's foot edema, and the talking heads I heard and saying this or that. It drove me crazy. Edema is also inflammation, and it's a cause from something. And I think treating people like they have brains is a good idea.
To be fair, though, most fans come from the perspective of, is he playing? When is he playing?
That's fair.
They don't care about all that. And people might say I'm a company man for this, but I think it's fair that Lawrence Frank says we don't have a timeline because we have to see how his knee responds. Like, he does this. Is there swelling? Then you move on to the next thing. Is there swelling? Like, how can you put a timeline on something like this when Kawhi can't know how his knee is going to react? Is that fair?
Oh, I think that's totally fair. I mean, I think time frames and timelines based on acute injuries are totally reasonable. Like, if Joel Embiid has his meniscus removed, and then we're given this time frame 4 to 8 weeks or whatever, 8 to 12 weeks or something like that. I think that's reasonable before like a reevaluation period, which the reevaluation limbo is one of the worst things in sports. But I think that's fair to be like, this person has this specific injury. It happened on this day. We did an MRI. We saw it. And the normal time frame is this long. We are, of course, going to reevaluate him. Is he out for the season? Yes or no? I mean, it might depend on this reevaluation, or yes, he is. I think that kind of stuff is great. Maybe if we had more medical people inside these rooms, then I think the Clippers media or Clippers people might feel more pressed to give out that information, but we don't. Why would we? It's like understandable. And I also don't want to press on how, I hate the word gamesmanship, but I don't want to press too much, especially if Kawhi doesn't want stuff out. I know that there was a huge disconnect between him and the Spurs, and you don't want to. I think Kawhi is maybe a little bit more, from what I can recall with the Spurs, you might be more sensitive about information kind of being out. I don't know that stuff exactly, but you also want to keep in mind what the team wants to do with the player and how they want to evaluate things. It is like the reason we have media out there is to ask difficult questions, but you also have to respect like the way that an organization goes about things like this. And the Clippers are sometimes a little bit tight-lipped about it, not just Kawhi. The Paul George thing was a little bit up and down as far as when he was coming back from his knee injury that he had against the Thunder.
Guess who got that answer? Me. The next media day when I asked him when he could have returned, and he said July.
Mm-hmm.
So he was never coming back. The second round
Yeah.
against Denver, it wasn't happening. The finals, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It honestly kind of made me feel a little bit better. Like, okay, so there was no chance of them winning this season because he wasn't coming back.
When I saw that injury live, I was like, oh, he's out the year. I thought hyperextensions always look worse often than they are. And Paul George just hyperextended his knee again. But I was just hoping that he wouldn't need surgery. And if he didn't need surgery, then he would be out the year. So, yeah. So,
what did you make of me being critical a little bit earlier of just the report that since training camp, since September, there hasn't been a setback? And my point is, well, he's not doing basketball activities, which are the things that have led to a setback in the past. So how much can we really put into that right now?
Yeah, it's all semantics, man. I mean, if you want to see it as he's not progressing and that's a setback, I think that would be reasonable. To me, this idea that he's not having a setback is so silly. He's not playing. Like, that's a setback, as far as I'm concerned. It's all semantics to me. I mean, if he's not playing basketball games, then we're not where we want to be. And that's really all I can say about it, is that if he's not playing on this much ballyhooed first game at Intuit Dome, the wall, we're going to have this Halo board, all this stuff, he's not playing. So I mean, if you want to call it a setback or not, like, that's fine. He's not playing. It's not what we want. It's not what he wants. It's not what anybody wants. And the semantics of it is it's all very silly. These pressers sometimes are like very, very interesting to me. It's just semantics, man.
If you had one question, a medical question about Kawhi that you could get answered with 100% truth, what would it be?
I would ask them maybe some specifics about the scope, what they saw. When was their last MRI? What did the MRI show?
There's 3 questions.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of questions I would probably ask the Clippers, but to me, ultimately all that matters is that Kawhi plays. So I have specifics that I would be interested in. Maybe when things are done with Kawhi Leonard, I will ask them and just to kind of get some information for myself, because I'm not going to need to spread like all this stuff afterwards. If I'm still kind of around the team and being credentialed and all that, maybe I'll ask then, but I know it's so sensitive now.
Yeah. And I respect like his privacy about everything. That's not an issue to me, because all that really matters is, can he play?
Yeah.
And he's not able to go right now.
I have a lot of questions. Like when he talk about inflammation, like how often are we getting pictures? Like, do you consider the pictures important? Like, are we getting MRIs every few months? Are they even necessary? Are we going off about his inflammation, just kind of looking at him and how he's playing? There's just like a lot of questions that could be asked here. But they're so specific and they're really meant for the medical team. It's all very fascinating to me. Kawhi Leonard's career is very fascinating. If I'm stepping away, trying to be away from being a fan, like, it's been a really interesting career. Isn't
there an alternate universe where he's in the GOAT conversation if you just had good health?
I do completely think so. I mean, I was watching.
That's why I feel for Kawhi, because he knows this too. There's a real possibility that if this guy was actually healthy continually throughout his career, he is in the damn GOAT conversation.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man. Like, I think that Kawhi Leonard, when he's totally healthy, is a spectacle. I remember I was in residency. I remember where I was when I watched him hit the shot against the Sixers, and I actually was rooting against it because I thought that Kawhi Leonard is not coming to the Clippers if they beat this team, and this is going to be too big of a moment. Like, if he hits this shot and how are you going to erase that memory? Like, literally, they could build a statue for Kawhi tomorrow. I'd be like, of course they did. He won them a championship. I thought that he was going to stay. He's still Kawhi Leonard and wanted to be in LA, but I was simultaneously rooting for him and against him that game, and I had so many feelings watching him hit that shot. And he's really just incredible. An incredible basketball player, and it makes it suck even more.
And what's most interesting to me is when he comes back from all the setbacks, from the ACL, from the meniscus, his efficiency on offense has always gotten better. He's always gotten better because he works on his craft so much. He stays in shape year round. Like, he's in elite physical peak shape that you could be in as an athlete. And he doesn't get rewarded with good health with his right knee. His knee betrays him anyways. He does everything right, and he still can't get love from his body.
Yeah, it really sucks, man. Like, I just wanted him to have one run here. And it really pains me to say it almost as if it's past tense, because I can't really depend on his body to hold up. I don't want to be doom and gloom. I think this is just realistic. Like, Kawhi really does need to show us that he can get through a playoff series. And all this stuff that's added up onto his knee, onto his legs, is just really concerning that he might not be able to. And I would love just to see him have like that Mavericks game. Like, that was the most exhilarating. That was the most exhilarating game I've ever seen as a Clipper fan. I've never seen a single player drag a team across the finish line like that. I will, in fact, I won't see anything like that again for a long time. If I never see something like that again as a Clipper fan, I almost wouldn't be surprised. He was brilliant in that game. I was so nervous. I was like, I was with a few of my friends, and I think we did a pod afterwards anyways, and I was nervous. I was really nervous. I think the Mavericks went up by like 4 or 5 in the fourth quarter, and I remember thinking like, oh, this is the end of this era. And then he just went Kawhi mode, and he's just a brilliant basketball player. It really sucks that his legs aren't allowing him to have the proper end of his prime that he deserves. But we'll see. I'm not selling out all hope. There probably was a lot of this feeling when he was a Raptor that maybe is Kawhi Leonard ever going to be the same again? And then he got load managed and they did well with him. So I don't want to sound like a bummer talking about this, but I think it's fair to say that Kawhi Leonard is an all-timer whose ceiling was high. And I hope that he does enough during this time with the Clippers that he can at least get closer to where that ceiling is, even if it's not in championships. But I really hope that he fulfills some of kind of his promise, because I've seen him play and I just think he's one of the best players I've ever seen. And I really want success for him. Yeah.
18 of 25 from the field for his 45 points in that game with 5 3-pointers, 72% field goal percentage.
Man.
It is one of the greatest, forget Clippers, must-win performances in the history of the NBA. Honestly.
He had like Shaq efficiency numbers. Shaq.
Oh, the entire series he did.
He was so good. He didn't like hit under 50. I think it was just that one catastrophic game in LA where the Mavs took the lead back 3-2 that he was not great. But aside from that, he was so efficient, so good. He was everything that we paid for. That was Kawhi Leonard, just really sucks because that team was really, really, really good.
They would have won it all that year. I'm going to go to my grave believing that.
No, I believe it. People forget how shook the Bucks looked against the Nets. They looked real shook.
They were down 0-2 to Phoenix. Like, I've seen Kawhi against Giannis in a high-stakes playoff series. I know that Giannis was a little bit better 2 years later, but I don't think it was enough to make up the gap. They would have won. Tough.
I really hope for the best for Kawhi. I think Clipper fans are better bet and better set just having fun with the team as is. The team is really fun. I think that there are a lot of really interesting players on the team that are worth talking about aside from Kawhi Leonard. So I think that's worth setting their minds on for at least the first month of the season, and then we can come back to Kawhi when he comes out. But the team almost went undefeated in the preseason. Like they played really well. I think the new guys all had their moments. I think the Jordan Miller looked great. I mean, there are lots of good things to talk about this team. I think the expectation for wins and stuff is kind of okay to kind of put in the rear view and just have fun with the team. Make it like 18-19, Don't think about wins. Think about just development and the guys that we have. So, yeah.
One of them that I want to see develop more by getting consistent minutes all year would be Jordan Miller.
Yeah.
I woke up today with another thought.
No.
Because I got on my soapbox a little bit on Friday and said, wait a second. What are we doing here? Like, they have a guy who has the most potential since Shea. He's turning 25 in January. It's not a season where we think they have championship expectations, at least until we know Kawhi can actually sustain himself and play in an entire playoff run. How is he not playing game one? I get it. There are tough decisions to be made. It's not that easy. There are guys in front of him conceivably. But I thought about this today. This is why you take guys that are older in the draft to hope to have them sooner than later, and that's the situation they have with Jordan Miller, and it doesn't look like he's going to play still. But you took him that late, so he could play right away. And now a year in, he's ready. So I know you'd have to probably make a trade or tell somebody and devastate another player who has more experience in the NBA
and more money than him. The Clippers are paying them more too. Money plays. That's part of it.
Easy. It's not easy. But damn it, Jordan Miller to me is the hope right now, and I just want to see him out there. I know you've been high on him for some time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Jordan Miller should play. I think there are hard decisions. I think he should play over Amir, personally. I think Amir should be given the spot initially, but I think Jordan Miller is just better for the team. And I think that's kind of where I've landed on, is that I'd rather see what we have with Jordan than what we know we have with Amir, and for this season, you know. And I think that's the decision that needs to be made. He's not playing. He plays too differently than guys like Dunn, than guys like Terrence. I mean, you know, guys like Dunn or Terrence or Norm or
KPJ,
you know,
Bones.
yeah, KPJ, Bones. He's too different from those guys. Like those guys are needed in their roles. But when you think about that scorer type, I would for sure, you know, and I really hate saying that stuff about Amir because I think he's proven himself. He's started playoff games, all that stuff. But for where the team is now, you know, I was big on the drum that like, oh, Jordan Miller needs to prove it above Amir Coffey. I just think that we need to see what we have with him, you know, and you know, I think while there is an idea that Jordan's a bit unknown and Coffey is what he is, which is one of the comments here. I think that I think the Clippers need to start tapping into the unknown a little bit more. I think they've been for many years not tapping into it. Like you've mentioned, Kobe Brown got a 10-game leash last year when the Clippers were in the midst of kicking everybody's asses or about to kick everybody's asses. And Jordan Miller should get that sort of leash too. And I think he's going to get it. I think there's going to be an injury at least that gives him a moment. And then he's going to have it. I just think
my problem is this. If we already know once he gets his moment, once he gets his opportunity, he's going to take advantage of it and stick, then you should probably just play that guy from the outset. If you already know he's going to take advantage of it and stick once he gets in, then just play him to start. He's that good.
It's just politics. There's politics in every work environment, Adam. You know that. Seniority plays a role. Contracts play a role. You know, the locker room plays a role. If you put a kid, you know, Amir Coffey has been in with the Clippers as long as anybody. And I think, like, you know, if you suddenly stop playing him and play Jordan ahead of him, maybe Zoo and Terrence would be a little bit perturbed, you know, maybe it wouldn't make them the happiest, you know, and those guys are like serious role players on the team. There's a lot of, I mean, the stuff with Russell Westbrook, we know better than anything last year, like Russ, the Clippers had to just accept being a bad team for a certain amount of games because Russell Westbrook has so much cachet. There's a lot of politics, you know, and like, just like any other work environment. Sometimes you have a colleague who is not great at this role, but they've just been there for years and years and years, and you have to almost let them fail so you can kind of, you know, show it to upper management or whoever, you know.
Coach Lou's done that in the past.
Yeah.
I just hope that if they start 1-4 or 2-7, that they quickly pivot, because if you're going to have a chance to be 6 through 8, this start of the year is pretty significant with the schedule. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a lot of time. I don't think there's a margin for error to go 10 games to figure something out. If they start slow, I hope they go to him quick, because you might have the best of both worlds for once. A guy that is developing and also helping you win now. That's what Jordan Miller could do.
Yeah, man. I've run out of stuff for Jordan too, just because he should play. I think he should play. I think he will play.
You're higher on this team, it sounds like to me, coming out of preseason than you were going into preseason. Is that true?
Yeah, you know, I think that the team is scrappy and can be good. I think that the biggest question about the team wasn't really answered in the preseason, and it's just how can James Harden keep the ship steady. We saw James Harden play just, you know, little halves and things like that. He looks great, but I think the biggest question will be like, how much can James Harden keep the offense afloat? I think the defense will be there, and I do think that the preseason was reaffirming in and letting me know that the Clippers defense looks like it will be for real. It's going to be a lot of effort, but I think that they have the guys that'll be vocal enough defensively. Jeff Van Gundy, who will kind of keep them on their toes enough. I think that the defense is serious, and the biggest question to me will how much can James Harden keep the offense afloat? And as long as he can keep it to the tune of like near top 15, then I think the Clippers will be pretty good. If he can't, or if he gets hurt, or if he gets burnt out, or he looks tired like he did last year, even when he wasn't the first option, then it could spell some bad stuff for the Clippers. So I think that it was nice to see them really put it together on defense, and the rotations make a lot of sense to me. I think Kevin Porter Jr. as the James Harden replacement makes a lot of sense to me. Um, I think Chris Dunn as the off guard makes a lot of sense. He was not really a point guard. He was more off, kind of thought that's what they were going to do with him anyways, and have him be a connector. I love seeing Nico and Chris out there together defensively. Kai Jones got better and better as the preseason went on. So there were reasons to be kind of optimistic. The issue is that there's just so many guys who are role players. You really do feel the void that Paul George left with not having that star there. But I have been reassured by the role players in the preseason.
Kenny, the GM, not so much a GM to me when he's saying, is it possible to trade Bones and Tucker for Cameron Johnson? And he goes, well, Brooklyn isn't contending anytime soon, so that's why I asked. That doesn't mean they're just giving away guys for nothing when they can get a better offer.
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm not sure why Brooklyn would do that, because especially consider they already have a score first, ball dominant guy there that they're trying to develop this year. I do think Terrence would really, I think Bones would really be so much better suited on a lottery team that could just give him a backup ramp, just be like, do what you want to do, man. It's pretty incredible that Denver was able to do that because Jamal Murray was hurt. But yeah, I'm not sure. Bones Highland a couple of years ago went for 2 second rounders. I think that I don't think that he has too much value. Shout out Matt Warren, by the way. I saw him in the comments.
Let's read this. First off, how the heck are you guys? Yeah. Secondly, I'm really starting to come around to the idea that this year the Clips will be living the Miller Kai life. He's been really trying to workshop something.
That's good, Matt.
and that's very solid. I have Sky Jones, and I don't care that Brian Seaman used it the other night. Okay, as long as he gives me credit.
Sky Jones is good. I think Miller Kai life is good.
The player good?
Yeah, that's a good question. Miller Kai life is good. Shout out Matt. Shout out Brandon. Shout out their new pod that they're doing. Good stuff to listen to. Shout out those guys. Yeah.
Talking ship.
Yeah, talking ship. Matt, I like Matt's guitar covers. I saw Weezer last weekend. I feel like Matt probably likes Weezer.
What song?
He does this thing on their pod where he would do little parody things based on, and it would cover like a popular song. Matt could tell you better than I can, but I like that. I like that he brought some musical touch into their pod. So shout out Matt. He's a funny guy, man.
Is Kai Jones going to be making sweet music for the Clippers off the bench to start things off this year? Do you think he's competent enough against backup bigs in the league that they don't crater his minutes to start off the season?
It's tough, I think that there was enough with Kai Jones that we saw that him, as long as he's consistent with setting screens and rolling to the rim and running in transition. The funny thing is I think a lot of what Kai brings will be dependent on how active the defense is pushing transition plays. If the Clippers get out getting steals and running, then Kai Jones is going to be the trailer dunker on every play. So if you're relying on Kai Jones to read pick and rolls, dropping back and guarding two effectively, I think that's when things get a little bit dicey. I think he had so many blocks this preseason, but you worry a little bit about his decision making on the fly. I think when it's just the matter of setting a screen and rolling, then he can do that. And he can do that to the extent that he's a lob threat, and I think I saw him do it more consistently as the preseason went on, that if he just sets screens and rolls, then I think that he's going to be a guy. Now, will Kevin Porter Jr. find him consistently? I don't know. James Harden will if they're kind of staggered together. I think him being a role threat and a dunker and a transition guy is very promising, but his decision-making on defense, I don't want to say that I'm sold on that just yet. He's just learning how to play still. So I think that there's a play-to-play incongruency that you can't really get from a highlight reel,
Yeah.
So it's tough, but and bigger guys will feast on him, but he's luckily not going to have to defend bigger guys that much because there just aren't that many post-dominant guys in the league anymore. So
there's a guy in here who just doesn't seem to get it. Cali 2025 said, we had a huge momentum in the last 5 years to being contenders, and now it's as if we've settled with settling. And he's talking about, we should still be trying to win a championship and stuff. It's not about politics. We should be focusing on the first championship, in my opinion. I mean, they may be laying the foundation for that, but it doesn't look like it's coming this season. They are in a different timeline now. I don't think you understand. What is the point of reloading for someone like Zach LaVine to take the place of Paul George if you still don't know if your number one option in Kawhi Leonard can stay healthy and play 7 games straight, which means a playoff series? What is the point? It's a complete roll of the dice. You want to double down even further on this era with the uncertainty with Kawhi Leonard's health? That doesn't make sense. The GM in Lawrence Frank is much smarter than you. Trust us.
Yeah, I think if Kawhi Leonard played last playoffs, the argument for LaVine would be a little bit more reasonable. They might have just caved and paid George and lived in CBA hell. But I think that if they would have let George walk and thought maybe we can get a star back, I think if Kawhi had been healthy and been playing all these games, and I think that then there's an idea a little bit more like, well, let's reload, let's get another star, let's do it now. But I think that the front office is probably a little bit less pressed to throw away assets for a Zach LaVine. Or I know that there's all this talk about Zach LaVine being, a first coming back with him. I think Zach LaVine is really, really good, and he's going to squash a lot of that pretty early in the season. I would love Zach LaVine. He
still might not stay healthy though himself.
That's true. Zach LaVine has his own injury concerns. Speaking of ACLs, so I think that if Kawhi Leonard was out there, I would agree a little bit. I would lean a little bit more to let's get another star, but he's not. So
if Kawhi ended up playing, 30 of the first 35 games or something like that, and they looked like a top 4 seed in the West, and James Harden looked even more spry than last season, and the role players were doing their thing, and guys were contributing, and it looked like they could be a contender or just need a little bit more offensive juice out there, then maybe they would do that. How realistic do you think that scenario is, though, right now? It's not. It's unlikely. What do you think, though? Because I do like the idea, and I've been coming around more and more with the report from La Murray saying that Norm will be starting even when Kawhi Leonard's back. The idea that Norm can really plug up a lot of the holes that have shown themselves without Paul George, that appeals to me a lot. I don't think that's so crazy. Because he can't play make like him. He's not as good as a defender when George would buy in on that end the last couple of seasons. He can't do everything. But if he gets you efficient 18, 19 per game, that goes a long way just right there with making up for some of the lost production.
Yeah, I think it's worth just thinking about. I know we talk about second side stuff, just all these kind of away from the primary action things that Paul George used to do. There would be a lot of times you would see James Harden coming up the floor. Kawhi Leonard would be in his park place on the elbow. And then you're also running some action with George on the other side of the floor from off of screens, or, maybe Zoo is setting something and he's doing a curl. If you don't have that, the floor is going to get shrunk and Kawhi is going to have less room to operate. You can't have a guy like, Derrick Jones Jr. effectively running those kind of plays, or Terrence Mann running those kind of plays. You really can't get almost anybody. Kevin Porter Jr. has not really shown to be a very willing off-ball guy. He can. You've mentioned his catch and shoot stuff, I know, Adam. But he's just not going to be running
48%. 48%.
He's just not going to be running off of pin downs like Paul George was. Norm Powell will. Norm Powell can literally do all the play sets that were there for George, except for putting him on the elbow, telling him to get a bucket. That's not Norm so much. But all the secondary stuff that we saw Paul George run, so the defense had to pay attention to not just Kawhi and not just James Harden, but they also had to pay attention to who was on the other side of the floor. All that stuff Norm can do. They can run the same playbook with Norm Powell. And that's the nice thing about Norm. Nobody else can do that. It makes a lot of sense to plug in Norm in that Paul George role. What does that mean for the defense? Obviously, you're going to be a little bit shortchanged on the defensive side compared to Paul George, who, if nothing else, is just a big body who's had lots of defensive pedigree consistently. But, Norman's going to be around a lot of bigger defenders. He's going to be the smallest guy on the floor compared to even
didn't
James Harden.
fail or get picked on a ton with the Power Rangers lineup. He didn't.
Yeah, so that was the nice thing about the Power Rangers lineup too, because he was the smallest guy during that lineup. So I think that it's worth doing. I would have understood the Terrence Mann, Derrick Jones Jr. combination too, but yeah, I mean the offense would have just been really, really, really tough. So I think you do really need Norm. Norm remains this really integral piece on these Clippers that I think that I hope that he really succeeds. He's been talking about wanting to be a starter for years and years and years. Now he has the opportunity. And I think keeping him as a starter, even when Kawhi comes back, makes a lot of sense when you just think about what was Paul George doing in the offense last year and what can Norm Powell do in the offense. Of course, Norm won't get his own touches to run plays or be set up on the elbow like George did, but then those plays will just go to Kawhi some more. They'll just be more pick and roll for James Harden, But all the other stuff that, all the other off-ball actions that Norm was doing to open up the offense, that George was doing, Norm Powell can do that stuff. So I think it makes a lot of tactical sense,
I think there's also some light years going on here. Norm being a starter can also up his trade value if the Clippers aren't where they want to be in February, where even though he could be thriving, the production could be good, they could be a couple of games under 500, they're not really going anywhere, and they might start the youth movement then, and they might be able to flip Norm for some valuable, I don't know, maybe they might get a first-round pick for Norm Powell if he's playing great and a team goes, hey, this guy can put us over the top. Like, he's this efficient from the outside. I think that's real.
I think Norm can have a really good first half of the season, especially if he's starting. Norm is good, he's a scorer. His splits will always be really good, or generally be quite good, especially if he's kept in score role and not playmaking role. Norm is good. He can score. I think like this team needs scorers, and he's in this really interesting spot where I simultaneously appreciate him and have looked to trade him like so much in his Clipper career, but I think he's needed much more now than ever, So yeah.
I just looking ahead a little bit, a team might say, oh, next year he's a $19 million expiring contract. We got him the rental for this playoff run, but then also after that, $19 million expiring. That's not nothing.
Yeah. He's his money on his deal has become less intimidating as the years go on. So he's much more tradable. Yeah.
Somebody or some facet of the Clippers offense that does worry me more heading out of the preseason would be Ivica Zubac and the idea of playing through him more. He had an up and down preseason, and it feels like there's very specific spots he needs to be at to go to work, or else he's taking too long or rushing his shot. If he's going to be featured more, he just has to be more reliable, because they will go away from him if it's not working early on. And that stuff worried me in the preseason, where after every game, it felt like Coach Lue was talking about either him not demanding the ball enough, or them not getting it to him enough, or getting it to him but not deep enough in the post. Like, it's kind of tricky with figuring out how to get Ivica Zubac to his sweet spots to keep him consistently in the flow of the offense.
Yeah, I think the more that Zoo is an offensive threat, I think the more teams will scout for him a little bit more, and the more that he won't just be comfortable catching the ball as the last line of offense. And he's going to have to deal with that stuff. I think those are the little things that maybe aren't talked about so much. Like, teams will try to push him off of his spot. Bigger players will try and push him off. Teams will, especially since if you run a double drag with Chris Dunn popping on the angle, then that guy is going to just clog up the middle, and Zoo might not catch an easy floater. He might catch it with around more limbs, I think the fact that we have less shooters on this team now will also affect Zoo as a roller, and all those pet 10 to 14 little baby hooks that he has, teams might try and stop that more. and he might not have it as easily, especially if he's just given the ball in the post. You worry about his durability. You worry about, you know, how those minutes will add up. You know, all minutes are not created equal. You know, the stuff that Zoo does this year might be more tiring and taxing than he did previous years. We want him to play 30 minutes per game. But can he handle 30 minutes per game with this workload? He's going to need to still be a real defender. He's going to still need to be that guy that defends everything at the rim and sees a lot of 2-on-1 action stuff. And it's a lot. He is going to have a lot on his plate. You know, he got paid. And I anticipate that he's going to be quite good this year. But we've seen Zoo get tired. We saw Zoo after that great, you know, stretch where he had like that 30-20 against Turner, right? That stretch of games get tired. We saw him kind of get tired. And when he gets tired, he sometimes gets hurt. So I think that those questions will be questions that Clipper fans should also think about if Zoo hits a dry patch here sometime in the season. It's just like a lot he has to kind of do. It's a real role player season, man. Like, how much can Norm Powell handle? How much can Zoo handle? How much can Terrence handle? Like, can these guys handle a little bit more responsibility? And, you know, we always talk about, man, these guys should get more usage, but some players don't react well with you. Just not as easy as just per 36ing people, you know?
Yeah.
So,
especially when you account for cardio, that doesn't at all, that number.
Yeah, man.
That's running down.
I mean, you've played, I mean, even people when we play pickup, like when you have a ringer on the floor with you, life is easy. You know, you can kind of let that guy cook. But if you're the ones running stuff and you have to actually run actions, you get tired and you don't run up and down the floor as easy as you do, especially not me with my knee, my Kawhi knees, man. I got sleeves on when I play hoops. So, yeah.
There's some people in here that don't see the foresight or don't have the foresight or the vision for what I'm talking about with Norman Powell saying, but why would you trade Powell? He's such a good shooter. The worst GM ever, Kenny, the GM, said, yeah, let's get rid of one of the game's best shooters in the game. Guys, if they're 22-28 near the trade deadline, it's time to start looking to next season. That's why you would make that move, to bring in a pick or a younger player, or to open up a spot for a younger player like Jordan Miller to start playing more. That's why it could happen. I don't think I'm that off by bringing this up now. It's a real possibility.
If you can get a first-round pick for Norm Powell, then you kind of just do it, honestly. Like, I know how good Norm is on the surface, but draft equity is so important in team building now. And you could flip that first for a guy who's probably, you know, better than Norm even. You know, first rounders are real commodities. Like, you can get a real player with a first rounder. It's been seen like over and over and over again. So and the Clippers have no picks that they have control over for many years. So I agree, though. I to an extent, like, I get the idea that Norm is this shooter. We don't have shooters. I agree. I mean, if you lose Norm for nothing, like, the team itself might be worse. But if you get some draft equity or players back or young guys back, man, I don't even think Norm has been stuck in this area of neutrality to negativity as far as his trade value goes for a couple of years, if we want to be real about it, because of his contract. So getting a positive asset back for him would be a slight coup, honestly. Just because of his money on his deal. Yeah.
Like, these people don't get it. Like, we're talking about a team that's 5 to 10 games under 500 around the trade deadline. You're not going anywhere. You're spinning your wheels just saying he's a really good shooter. That's awesome. If you're still 5 to 10 games under 500 around then, it didn't mean that much, apparently. So it's time to continue to move forward with this, I don't know, hybrid retooling, rebuild that's going on right now. I don't know if you guys knew this, but James Harden can opt out of his deal after this year. So there's a real good chance that the Clippers could go in a different direction very soon here. And that's one of the reasons you might also considering trading Norm around the trade deadline. Like, you get something for him and you can open up slots for younger guys at that point. People are saying, but then who's going to shoot and stuff? You're losing anyways under this assumption here, and that's why you're getting rid of him. So who's going to shoot isn't that big of a deal. You're saying then maybe KPJ is back from his suspension and he gets more time since he's still on a 2-year deal, or it opens up more minutes for Jordan Miller. This is not these people. I'm sorry. I get frustrated sometimes in here, Doc.
It's tough, man. I mean, this year is tough because the Clippers really need to look at the Rockets and how the
Yeah,
Rockets
that's
are
true.
doing. And they
But
really want to stay ahead of the Rockets.
what if
So
you just can't? What if you're just not? It's not
uh,
reasonable. Like the Rockets might be pretty
yeah,
good. They might.
they really might be pretty good. They're really talented. Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely have the talent and a roster on paper that looks to be more healthy than the Clippers is
Yeah.
currently right now. Any other major concerns that you have heading into the season? And maybe just a little bit of a preview of opening night against the Phoenix Suns. Where do you kind of put them? Because people have them all over the place. I know somebody like Kendrick Perkins the other day was like, I wouldn't be that shocked if they came out of the West somehow. It all comes together for them. Not one of the dumber things he said this week,
Yeah.
but it's still it's dependent on a lot of things with them going right too, with mix, with chemistry and health, with KD now at 36. And even Booker has had some health concerns the last couple of years where he's missed games. How do you feel about opening night against a Phoenix Suns team that is looking to come out with, I don't know, a mindset of proving that we do have top end talent and we can be a contender this year?
I mean, I think the Suns are going to be good this year. I think the Clippers are kind of in that 6 through 12 range, depending on Kawhi Leonard. It feels like the Suns should be favored on paper by probably a decent number, but first time in Intuit Dome, that crowd, that arena, the Clippers absolutely could thrive off of that. Yeah, it's I think that's a tough game. Yeah. I don't think that the Suns are a particularly great defense still. But the Clippers are not a particularly great offense, so it's real. It's a real clashes of the sides. I'm hoping. I think the game will be close. I think that the game will be exciting and fun. Phoenix also got shellacked by the Clippers last year to end the season pretty memorably with the Russell Westbrook game in Phoenix, and then got close to losing again soon after with the Bones Highland game. So I wonder if they remember that and they try to come out very serious, but they're good. Like on paper, they're a better team than the Clippers, but the games aren't played on paper. So I think that there's going to be a lot of excitement. That's going to be a home game and the opening and all that. James Harden will be fresh, and I think it's going to keep that game close. So I'm excited for it. Should be fun.
If I give you the number, Kawhi plays 45 games. How many games are the Clippers winning this year?
45.
45.
Oh, man. 45. So let's say, and he's reasonably healthy.
And he's played at a pretty high level in those 45.
Yeah, could the Clippers go like 29-16 or something in those games, and maybe for the rest of the way win like a dozen or so games? I feel like if Kawhi plays less than 50 games, but between like, around that area, then you're really shooting for like 42 wins. That's what you're kind of hoping for. If Kawhi plays like 55 plus, then you could talk about, mid 40s maybe. But I think if you're saying 45, if you're assuming that you have a pretty good team around Kawhi Leonard doing those games, could they get to 40 to 42? I think that the number I often look like is 42. I really want the Clippers just to have a winning record, to continue their streak of winning records. That's been going on for like a dozen years. So I'm looking at that. Will that get you in the play-in? It's tough to say. I mean, it did not get you in the play-in last year. So
46 was the 10th seed with the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
Mongo Project says, what if we have a bad record to start the season, but it was all close games? Then you still have a bad record. You don't get any extra bonus points. Yeah. I get what you're saying. Maybe you're not as far. It's just the record looks bad, but you were in a lot. Then you're USC. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, the GM still responding because he doesn't like the fact that he asked a really ridiculous trade question for Cameron Johnson for PJ and Bones. Hey, my guy, if you're going to call yourself the GM, I'm sorry. We got to do better than that. That's all.
I like Cam Johnson. Nice player.
Yeah, I'd love to get him. That'd be cool. Yeah. That'd be cool. I'd take Dorian Finney-Smith.
Man. Yeah, beggars can't be choosers, man.
All right, Dr. Shap. Well, I appreciate you doing this. Where can everybody
Yeah.
find you? Obviously, we promoted it a bunch, but it's an
Yeah.
important series you guys have going on right now.
Yeah, we're doing this is kind of a home and home, I guess we're doing right now. We had Adam and Law Murray on our Around the Beat. We're gonna have Tomer and Justin on tomorrow. They'll be airing tomorrow. The Law of the Jam, the podcast is our pod. 2 and 3 Hoops is where you can see all the writing that we do. We've been doing it for a long, long, long time. But yeah, at the Law of the Jam pod is the Twitter handle for the pod that I often run. And listen in. We'll always be talking about the Clippers, so you know where to find us.
Well, one of the reasons I always like you guys is because you come away with like a realistic outlook of the Clippers, the season, who players are, some high level basketball stuff too, talking with Chicago sets and everything.
Yeah.
It's very fun. I'm a big listener. I've never missed a show, I don't know, the past year at least.
Yeah. We appreciate you, Adam. Adam, I was in residency listening to Clippers talk, like as I was on nights, like in between, like I was on call in the hospital, and like as I would lie down for like a 30-minute rest, I would listen to Clipper talk, like your post-game stuff. So the feeling is mutual.
Kenny, the GM, says I'm missing the point. Just change your name, man. The GM. You're like who is that awful GM that made the trade? He used to be with Philadelphia, and then he was with Brooklyn when they traded for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. Billy King.
Yeah. Oh, bummer. Sorry, Kenny.
Is this Billy King that we're talking about here?
It's rough.
Hey, if you are a GM, maybe the Clippers could get a good deal off you. Maybe who's running things in Chicago for them to give away Alex Caruso and not get a first-round pick back from the team with all of them?
Yeah, man.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, man. I mean, Josh Giddey time, the Giddey era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Love you, Dr. Shap. For
All right,
Dr.
man.
Shap, I'm Adam Moslin. This has been another edition of Clippers Talk Live, and I love everyone in here, including the Kenny GM.